Okay, welcome everybody to our keynote address for the Women in Cannabis Summit. Thank you so much to everybody who's been participating today, asking questions, all of our panelists and our sponsors and the incredible volunteers who are keeping this working. So yay, we're so pleased. So I am here to introduce Shaleen Title. And I have to confess that the entire Heady Vermont team has a huge fangirl crush on Shaleen Title. In fact, we were originally going to do the summit last year with Shaleen as the keynote, and we decided to postpone it a year. But before we did, we made sure to book her a year in advance because there is nobody out there like Shaleen Title. She was dubbed the People's Weed Watchdog by Boston Magazine. She's a drug policy activist and attorney specializing in marijuana regulations. She serves as one of the 5 commissioners on the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission. She holds the social justice chair. And before her time on the commission, she co-founded THC Staffing, a cannabis recruiting firm focusing on equality and inclusion. She co-authored the Massachusetts marijuana legalization referendum, and she served as a senior staffer for Colorado's Amendment 64 legalization campaign. She was also a founding board member of the Minority Cannabis Business Association and Marijuana Majority, and she served as a trustee for Students for Sensible Drug Policy, and she's a board member of the Family Law and Cannabis Alliance, as well as the National Lawyers Guild. Shaleen has won a whole host of power, justice, and sheer awesomeness related awards over the last 15 years, but we suspect 2012 might have been her banner year because she won both the High Times Freedom Fighter Award and the Hunter S. Thompson Young Attorney Award. Lest you think a power lawyer, cannabis activist, and freedom fighter is nothing but utter seriousness, we suggest that you also follow her on Twitter, where her sassiness, humor, and utter unwillingness to suffer fools gladly will totally make your day. So everyone, please welcome, even though she can't hear your massive round of applause, our keynote speaker, Shaleen Title.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I'm having computer problems, but I've called in from my phone, which appears to be working. So thank you again for having me here. I've been looking forward to this for a year now. I'm very grateful to Monica, Kathy, all the organizers and volunteers for putting the summit together. But I will say, when I hear my introduction being given, I feel like maybe the most productive thing this will give is to show that I sound like somebody who should really have it together, even now. And I don't feel like I have it together at all. And maybe the one thing I do today is show you that people who seem like they should have it together do not right now. And that is okay, because we are in a very strange time. So a lot of pressure right now for how to open a keynote during a time that's the biggest crisis maybe any of us have ever seen. So I wanted to start with a couple of quotes, and forgive me because I know that's kind of tacky. It's like Webster's dictionary defines women in cannabis as, but bear with me, because this quote has meant so much to me since I was really young. I had it as my Facebook cover photo for a while. I may have even had it back on MySpace. It's always spoken to me. And this is from Buckminster Fuller, who was an inventor and a visionary from right here in Massachusetts. And he said, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." That's been an inspiration of mine since I first became an activist. Since I first lost a campaign, California's Prop 19, and I was thinking about, how working with existing models was so difficult, and you have to start something new. It stayed with me as an entrepreneur, as a regulator, and particularly as a regulator where there is no handbook, where we are a commission of 5 people, 4 of whom are women, and we have to create this completely by ourselves. And the new model is, this is what a regulator looks like for marijuana. It looks like women. But it's especially bringing me comfort now, because it's a scary thing that all existing models are obsolete at this moment, including perhaps our models for cannabis. As new as it is, it may be obsolete now, and we need to build a new one. A similar quote is one that I just read this week from Arundhati Roy, who is a writer in India. And she said, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, which I had to look up, it means extreme greed, our data banks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. And it got me thinking about women in cannabis and how we might be uniquely suited to this environment, because nobody gets into cannabis, particularly women, because we think it's going to be easy or straightforward, right? Women here have a particular form of tenacity and an appetite for risk. And it makes me think that this little sisterhood that we have, and we definitely have a sisterhood in New England, particularly in Massachusetts. And if you're new to this industry, if this summit is one of your first introductions, you'll see the sisterhood soon. And if you've been here for a while, you know about it. We have a certain comfort with uncertainty. Maybe we even like uncertainty. And I think that's a really strong asset to have right now. And the third and last quote is not really a quote, it's advice from my mom that she's always given me, which is, when you feel helpless or overwhelmed or paralyzed, focus on what you can control. And how much control you have over what, it'll vary as your life goes on, but you'll always have something you can control. So focus that and use it to your full extent. So what I control now is the cannabis industry in Massachusetts with my colleagues. And I think the principle we should all be following in this crisis is to start with the people who are most vulnerable. So for us, that's patients, workers, and small businesses. So as I mentioned earlier, our commission is 5 people. We have about 70 staff members. 4 of our 5 commissioners are women. We're an independent agency, the Cannabis Control Commission in Massachusetts, and we're not beholden by any political office because we're an independent agency, not under any office. And we also make all of our decisions publicly. And I do think that being a women-run commission that's independent that way has really made us unique. So quick recap of where we are in Massachusetts with COVID-19 and cannabis. On March 23rd, the governor issued an emergency order that closed down all adult use cannabis businesses while allowing medical dispensaries to stay open. We're the only state with adult use businesses that has forced them to shut down. Before that, out of concern for patients who need to stay inside to stay safe, we had already allowed medical certification to be issued via telehealth. So now we have a lot of people who were not previously patients who are registering as patients. They can do it remotely, and our patient registrations have shot up by 158%. This shutdown of adult use businesses, it was not intentional, but it hurt small local businesses in particular just because of the way that our laws are set up. So our medical law, which passed in 2012, required medical cannabis businesses to be vertically integrated. That means a big business that controls every aspect of the supply chain. But the adult use law allows small businesses who just do cultivation or manufacturing or retail. And we had an equity component to our law, which requires us to include historically harmed or disproportionately harmed communities and groups that have been historically left out, like women-owned businesses. So that means that when adult use shuts down, those are the businesses that have had to shut down. That is one of the reasons that I joined the call a couple of weeks ago with over 30 legislators and many industry groups to allow adult use to reopen, primarily because there are so many patients who don't want to register, especially veterans who now don't have access. And also because I think we can address the very valid health and safety concerns without shutting down the businesses by curbside pickup, delivery, enhanced health and sanitation, these really important things that we see happening in other states and here in Massachusetts with medical businesses. So last week, the commission did something pretty bold among all of this, which is that we issued an amended order that allows adult use businesses to continue to operate under certain circumstances if they are contributing to the medical supply chain, which where demand is certainly going to go up as the number of patients go up. We also created a way for workers to submit anonymous complaints and reminded employers that there are whistleblower laws that protect employees who make public health complaints from being retaliated against. I also gave out my direct cell phone number during a public meeting for any workers or patients who see something that concerns them in terms of health or safety. In the meantime, our governor has doubled down. He continues to be asked about this, but he continues to say that it's a non-starter for him. If you followed the vape ban in Massachusetts, you might have observed that leadership in Massachusetts tends to find prohibition comforting. You know, if there's a problem, we tend to go back to prohibition. So there is a lawsuit pending to potentially reopen adult use businesses. They have their first hearing for injunctive relief on Tuesday, but that's the current status here. The commission, as I mentioned, did take bold action last week. And I think that's notable because in the 3 years I've been a commissioner, I wouldn't describe us as bold. I would describe us as overall thoughtful, competent, measured, diverse in thought. But we don't always do things that are bold. And I think that is an important thing to think about because the reason is we're in this unique environment where the status quo is not going to hold up and there has to be some change, and not changing isn't an option, and we need drastic action. And even bodies like ours that are not necessarily always going to be acting boldly understand that we really need to take action. And so even though our particular crisis in cannabis is just a blip in the larger world crisis, I see a similarity in the opportunity to find power among chaos, even if it's just using your own voice, where we have this situation where you don't have time to mull over necessarily or work at a glacial pace, and there isn't any status quo to cling to broadly. In cannabis, we've always been this way. Whether you're a business or an activist or a regulator, you just have to figure it out or drown, right? And it really is similar to what we're facing in this moment as a society. We're unique in that we are accustomed to that feeling. We've never felt, I don't think, if we're in cannabis, like we're comfortable or stable or predictable, and sometimes we're comfortable with that. And so I think we might be uniquely equipped to deal with this when it comes to what the new models will look like. It's a good time to step back and ask ourselves, big picture, what do we want cannabis to look like? The plant's going to be fine, right? The plant's been around for thousands of years. It's going to be here no matter what. What's our vision that we're working towards as women in cannabis, individually and collectively? For me, it's always been about fairness in legalization. It's always been about treating users like the law-abiding citizens that they are, and accepting the ways that they use cannabis in their daily life, not having to hide it because of stigma or because of a racist criminal justice system. And we've been heading toward that, certainly. I don't think we're quite at that vision yet. But when I was thinking about my vision, it got me thinking about back in 2014, when things were looking really promising for women in particular. We had statistics showing that women leading cannabis companies were a huge proportion. I want to say maybe a third, much more than the number of women who lead companies in other industries. And I had this quote in Newsweek that really resonated with people that still comes up all the time now, where I said, women in their 40s are going to be the ones who really push cannabis into the mainstream. And I was thinking about that acceptance of cannabis in daily life. But over time, we lost that progress. The most recent statistics show that the number of women leading cannabis companies is now lower than in other industries. And I think we've seen a lot of greed. And I had this half-formed thought that I wanted to share with you. And normally, if this was a keynote I was giving, I would be in my office, drinking coffee, peacefully coming up with this idea, and I'd be making eye contact with you, and it would be a great applause line. In this case, true story, I was trying to fully form this thought, and my son was home. Of course, he's not in school. I was desperately trying to find a way to occupy him. And I gave him some blue hairspray that I found in the cabinet, because we're on week 5 of quarantine, trying to find ways to entertain our children, if any of you are in the same boat. And I had this blue hairspray that I bought in some midlife crisis, and I gave it to him. And I'm like, you can spray anybody's hair blue if you just let me think for a second. And I still couldn't fully form this. So maybe I'll get to it. But in this current moment, I'll just do my best, and I'll give you my half-formed thought, which is, what if this crisis brings us closer to where we were in 2014, and is what pushes that greed or avarice, that new word that I learned. If it pushes that greed out, not because of some cleansing or anything supernatural, but because of market forces where greed doesn't necessarily bring you to this industry, and we go back to where it's the people who are here because they wanted to be, because they truly believe in this plant, because they truly believe in this purpose. Maybe it will bring us back closer to that path that we saw so clearly in 2014, and where women were doing so well. So maybe I'll complete that thought, and maybe I won't. Maybe you will, because that's just where we are now. But back to my mom's advice, to focus on what you can control, and one day maybe it's just getting out of bed and changing out of your pajamas. Maybe it's something awesome that you have been working on that you change, like what Monica and Kathy have done with this summit, to make it something where we can connect online. Maybe it's changing something that you were already working on. Maybe it's stepping back on something that you were working on to make room. I had to do that this week. One thing I've been doing since October 2018 is to abstain on votes for licenses where the company has signed agreements with a city or town that I believe go beyond the law. So this is a big problem that we have in Massachusetts. And if any of you are from other states where you are looking at what legalization might look like, I really encourage you to consider this, because it's the number one thing I would change if I could go back: how much control cities and towns have, and whether they need to contribute to fairness and equity goals. I have a list that I made online, my top 10 must-haves in any cannabis bill, and that's one of them. And you can find it if you just Google my name and Leafly. A lot of those might be obsolete now, but I do think it's really important that we center those same principles. So this week I had to actually stop the practice. Between October 2018 and this week, every time we voted on a license, I would go and get the community host agreement myself and review it, and then abstain if I needed to, because our commission had decided not to review them. But I didn't have I couldn't do it, with my time constraints, with this new reality that we're in. So you may have to do that. You may have to have hard decisions about what you're prioritizing now, and that is okay. But I think, given how much change needs to happen, your voice and your power might be more important than they ever have been, especially if you're comfortable in chaos and uncertainty. You may also need to stop and grieve before you move on and rebuild existing reality. When I think about what I wanted this speech to look like a year ago, when we planned it, it was April 2020, you know, a whole month of 420, a time when a lot of the measures that we put in place in Massachusetts were just about starting to pay off. Our first retail store in Boston opened in March. It was minority owned. It's one of our economic empowerment applicants. It was a huge step forward. Those are actually the last people that I hugged before quarantine, was the store Pure Oasis in Boston. They had to close after only being open for 2 weeks. I'm sure they'll be open again soon. But it goes to show that we have to be ready for anything in these times, right? And being cannabis people, I think that we're used to that. But you may need to stop and grieve what your path was before you can move on to acceptance. So let me close by remembering 2 people and hoping that we honor their spirit and making one practical request of you. The first is Charlotte Figge and her family. She certainly did not ask to be a hero and to start an entire movement, but she certainly did. And I don't know if any of us would be here if it wasn't for her. I probably wouldn't be. So let's honor her. And it's worth looking back really far too, as well, and thinking about how this isn't the first time we've endured demoralizing, heartbreaking setbacks, including the very first prohibition. I don't know about you, but I've been thinking about people in the 1920s and the 1930s, and particularly the women who were fed up and were often remembered as the reason why prohibition was repealed. I'm also remembering Mary Jane Rathburn, known as Brownie Mary, who was born in 1922. She was divorced. She lost her child to a drunk driver. She developed several debilitating conditions. And despite all of those setbacks, Mary modeled what it is to control what you can and to focus on bringing compassion to the most vulnerable people. She was a hospital volunteer in San Francisco during the 80s and 90s. She baked marijuana brownies for dozens of patients. She was arrested 3 times, but public outcry made it difficult for local authorities to prosecute her. And her commitment was a major factor in winning approval of San Francisco's Proposition P and later California's landmark Proposition 2015. And it seems fitting that she was one of the founders of the very first medical dispensaries. So may we all carry her tenacious spirit, Charlotte Figge and her family's spirit, and the thousands of advocates and caregivers who have sacrificed so much for us as we build on their work that has showed solidarity and resilience always win in the long run as we charge forward and we create a new reality in our own visions. I will leave you with one practical request. The most effective thing that we've done in Massachusetts is to collect racial and ethnic data on agents and owners. Every bold action that I've been able to approve or get approved at the commission was based on that data, and no other state is collecting it the way we are. It's a pretty easy thing to ask for, and most reasonable people will be willing to do it. So please ask your state to collect racial and ethnic data on ownership and employment. And then as far as COVID-19 goes, we're seeing something similar where we're not going to get the actions that we need until we have the data. Senator Warren and Congressman Presley from Massachusetts have made efforts to collect racial and ethnic data on patients. Again, easy, practical thing that you can do to make a real difference. So if you take one thing away, please support collecting racial and ethnic data on both COVID-19 and on cannabis. So with that, I will let you get to the yoga session. Again, thank you so much for having me. If you ask me any questions on Twitter, I will be glad to reply today.
Thank you so much, Shaleen. That was magnificent. Hopefully you are all joining us now in our fangirl crush on Shaleen Title. Follow her on Twitter. She's incredibly entertaining and fierce. And I hope you will flutter with questions. And we thank you so much for everything that you're doing for cannabis, for Massachusetts, and the world. Okay, so coming up at 1:35, yoga with Kamalika K in the Film House. And then at 1:45 in the Film House, community relations and culture change. 1:45 in the great room, the ins and outs of running a legal/illegal business. And 1:45 in the classroom, cannabis science, history, tech, and research. So we will see you over there. Thanks, Shaleen.